why are the grand questions of science important for the public?
Well, not all scientists ever have the privilege of answering alone the grand questions of science, but it's the grand questions that are the carrot, the intellectual carrot that's put out there that actually seduce people to wanting to do science in the first place, and they keep you going all throughout the journey. And often the fun of doing science is not even answering that great question, but it's the path you take along the way. And it's that path that gets you closer to the machinery of how the world works.
And that great question's always out there.
The great questions, and once you solve that, there's going to be another question on the other side of it. So don't be fooled.
Neil deGrasse Tyson. Popular science communicator, icon for thousands, director of the Hayden Planetarium, host of Cosmos and Star Talk, guest on popular TV shows, author, legend, icon. Dan, did you cross out the important bits here? What? No, I mean where I wrote about the allegations against Neil deGrasse Tyson. The script has a giant line through it. Well, the joke's on you. I can read despite the big line, and this is important, goddammit, so I'm going to carry on. To hell with your Reddit. I'm British Empire viewers, science and culture correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, a newspaper that apparently sent me to write some puff piece about Neil deGrasse Tyson in light of him defending Elon Musk on Twitter. Now, the Daily Telegraph loves rich people, partially because their souls are the most delicious when they fend the giant ritual altar in our sub-basement that powers the United Kingdom with its sheer evil energy. But I think even for our newspaper, we should try and stay away from being shy about when allegations have been made against certain people. Neil deGrasse Tyson was an icon to many, undoubtedly. As a black scientist in the public eye, the director of the Hayden Planetarium no less, and host of popular science shows, his presence alone was an inspiration for thousands. It wasn't long ago that every scientist you saw on TV was a white man, and in this case, representation did matter. When people see themselves on TV like they could with Neil, the horizons of what's possible in their heads expanded. A lot of black children will have seen Neil deGrasse Tyson on TV and thought, oh god, I can be a scientist. I want to be a scientist. And because of deGrasse Tyson's face being everywhere, his popularity, his communication skills, that wasn't just a pipe dream, that was demonstrably a possibility. Neil deGrasse Tyson did a lot of good just by being the face of astrophysics for a generation. But in 2014, Tchia Ahmet accused Neil deGrasse Tyson of raping her while they were both graduate students in astronomy at UT Austin, ultimately leading to her dropping out of the program. Other stories of sexual harassment followed, from an astronomy professor and from a production assistant on Cosmos. The follow-up to the famous Carl Sagan-fronted documentary series I may or may not have got super high while watching in my early 20s, which deGrasse Tyson co-created with the Family Guy creator Seth MacFarlane. Strange combination, especially since MacFarlane isn't exactly known for creating smart content, but years later we had the Orville, and that decision doesn't look as weird in retrospect. Neil deGrasse Tyson responded to these allegations by way of a Facebook note titled On Being Accused, in which he admitted to engaging in some dodgy behaviour that he claims was unintentionally misinterpreted. Although, he denied rape outright, claiming all sexual contact between himself and Ahmet was consensual. And worse, he accused her of having based her accusations against him on a false memory, something for which he has no evidence besides implying that this is likely the case because she believed in some rather unscientific things. I should say here, in case there is any doubt, that believing in weird stuff does not make people less likely to remember traumatic events that happened to them, and the fact that Neil deGrasse Tyson insinuated this is deeply troubling, hinting at a sort of rationalist chauvinism that he shares with other popular scientists such as Richard Dawkins, dismissing the emotions and experiences of people who do not meet their standards of being a rational, science-minded person. I myself believe science should be the basis of how we see the world, but because I'm not a dick, I don't just not believe someone when they say they've been hurt because they believe some kooky stuff. As Tyson himself put it, for me, what was most significant was that in this new life, long after dropping out of astrophysics graduate school, she was posting videos of coloured tuning forks endowed with vibrational therapeutic energy that she channels from the orbiting planets. As a scientist, I found this odd. Meanwhile, according to her blog posts, the drug and rape allegation comes from an assumption of what happened to her during a night she cannot remember. It is as though a false memory has been implanted, which, because it never actually happened, had to be remembered as an evening she doesn't remember. Nor does she remember waking up the next morning and going to the office. I kept a record of everything she posted, in case her stories morphed over time, so this is sad, which for me defies explanation. So, with apologies to my editors, I'm not going to be taking the side of the accuser here, even for comedic effect. This is just too serious, too awful. That, and the rise and fall of Neil deGrasse Tyson is a tragic story, For all that he has done, he once represented something powerful, and the tainting of that legacy is truly heartbreaking. Black people deserve to see themselves in positions of power, in a variety of fields. Black people deserve to know that they can be a scientist if they want to, that they can be on TV, being an expert in astrophysics no less. And I hope that they still do feel that way, and I hope they still can and they still get the role models they deserve. And that the brazen actions of one powerful man hasn't stopped the coming of spring in that regard. Solidarity to every black scientist out there. There are amazing ones still active, thank God. Christopher Jackson, for example. You deserve the world. Academia is rough for minorities, I know that firsthand, and it's even worse for black people than for people like me. So, before I go deeper into how Neil deGrasse Tyson became the fallen star of popular science, it's worth going a little bit into how his star rose, and how important that star rising was for so many people.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, I asked you to take the dog out for a walk when I left the house 4 hours ago. Now I come back and this little mother Sputnik is done pissed on my drapes. Now I've got to get rid of those things and get new ones. Neil, it doesn't make any sense. You're an astrophysicist. How can you not keep track of little details like this?
Well, actually, it's the little details that cannot be kept track of by definition. In 1927, a German university lecturer named Werner Heisenberg came to a seemingly paradoxical conclusion that the more we know about the position of a particle in physical space, the less we know about its momentum, and vice versa.
Raj, have you seen Howard?
I think he's eating lunch. Sheldon, I want you to meet Neil deGrasse Tyson from the Hayden Planetarium in New York.
I'm quite familiar with Dr. Tyson. He's responsible for the demotion of Pluto from planetary status. I liked Pluto. Ergo, I do not like you.
But I actually didn't demote Pluto. That was a vote of the International Astronomical Union.
If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas.
Neil deGrasse Tyson allegedly was encouraged to study astrophysics by Carl Sagan himself, a popular scientist, host of the first series of Cosmos, sexy fuckboy, and essentially the founding father of scientific skepticism as a school of thought. So, if at any point you interacted with an internet skeptic, whether in its initial form as a critic of pseudoscientific thinking, or in its screaming, crying, throwing up successor form as weird YouTubers desperately trying to convince you that their hatred for women is totally rational actually, Carl Sagan was the grandfather of that community, although personally, I think he would have despised the latter kind just based on everything I know about him. Carl Sagan was one of the people talking about potential climate change back in the 70s after all. And the fact that he saw so much promise in Neil deGrasse Tyson suggests that he probably wasn't one of those people who would end up screaming into their microphones in 100 YouTube videos in a fit because a black man was cast in a Star Wars movie. Tyson majored in physics at Harvard, later getting an MA in astrology from the University of Texas at Austin, where he didn't spend as much time in the lab as he was supposed to, which ended his pursuit of a doctorate. A man after my own heart in that respect, honestly. After some time as a lecturer in astronomy at the University of Maryland in the late 80s, he earned an MPhil and a PhD in astrophysics from Columbia University, and in 1994, Tyson joined the Hayden Planetarium as a staff scientist. He would become director in 1996 after a year as acting director. Since then, he's written a bunch of columns and books, served in US government commissions, received a medal for distinguished public service from NASA, and hosted everything from PBS's Origin to the reboot of his one-time Mentors TV show Cosmos. He also had a podcast called Star Talk, which I personally used to love listening to. And if you've ever heard Star Trek actor Nichelle Nichols telling the story of how Martin Luther King Jr. himself convinced her not to quit playing Lieutenant Uhura on the show, that interview was from Star Talk. And despite everything Neil deGrasse Tyson has done, I can't deny how powerful the episode of the podcast was, and remains. I still think about it constantly. It's incredible.
I turn, and instead of fan, there's this face the world nose with this beautiful smile on it. And I remember thinking, whoever that fan is going to have to wait because Dr. King, Dr. Martin Luther King, my leader, is walking toward me, not 10 feet away, with a beautiful smile on his face. And then this man says, "Yes, Miss Nichols, I am that fan. I am your best fan, your greatest fan. And my family are your greatest fans. As a matter of fact, this is the only show on television that my wife, Coretta, and I will allow our little children to watch, to stay up and watch, because it's on past their bedtime.
Neil's work has been known to have that effect on people. Some of it is powerful. Space is impressive enough on its own, but Neil deGrasse Tyson really was an exceptional science communicator. He made space seem not just terrifying and vast, but cool and interesting and fun. Even just the way he used to talk about black holes, and the idea of a human falling into a black hole was amazing. Exploring the idea of a spaghettification of the human body as different parts of you would expand as you fell into a gravity well. It was fascinating and inspiring. And before him, there really wasn't anyone doing that sort of thing that looked like Neil deGrasse Tyson. And that shit's super important. As Tyson himself has said, "I've never before in my life seen an interview with a black person on television for expertise that had nothing to do with being black. And at that point, I realized that one of the last stereotypes that prevailed among people who carry stereotypes is that sort of black people are somehow dumb. I wondered maybe that's a way to undermine this stereotype that prevailed about who's smart and who's dumb. I said to myself, I just had to be visible, or others like me, in that situation. That would have a greater force on society than anything else I could imagine. My life experience tells me, when you don't find blacks in the sciences, when you don't find women in the sciences, I know these forces are real, and I had to survive them in order to get to where I am today. So before we start talking about genetic differences, you've got to come up with a system where there's equal opportunity. Then we can start having that conversation. These were things, unfortunately, that needed to be said, that not enough people were saying, and things that you never would have expected to hear from a senior scientist at the time. His presence in the media, and as a prominent figure in the scientific community, genuinely helped a lot of people feel like they could do science, like they could be a success, personally. Like they had a place in the world as one of the people who can help to answer the great questions of our existence, to contribute to the expanding knowledge of our species. That's powerful shit. But he did a lot of things wrong. In his capacity as a public figure, in a position of power, he succumbed to what many powerful men have, and took advantage of that power. He hurt people. And when push came to shove, he couldn't admit what he'd done wrong. He gave what was at best a non-apology, with outright denial bordering on gaslighting thrown in there for good measure. From an article from Vice, the woman with a Pluto tattoo who accused him of groping her upper arm and shoulder, she could have told him of her discomfort in the moment, Tyson says. The woman who felt uncomfortable during a wine and cheese night, she showed no indication of being uncomfortable during their long conversation, which he says had been in the same vein as all other conversations they'd ever had. And Tyson makes sure to point out that the woman who said she'd been drugged and raped by him dropped out of graduate school. As for the impact this had on black scientists, Shanda Prescott-Weinstein for Scientific American put this better than I ever could back in 2018. The truth is that black academics, usually know what's up with black people in departments across campus, even when they hate each other. It's also the case that black academics are often loath to air a dislike for each other in front of white people. We know that the bar for being seen as good is higher for us than others, and we tend to be forgiving of people who may or may not be our favourites. My first memorable lesson about black academic solidarity was from Tyson himself. At the 2003 National Society of Black Physicists meeting, he explained during a keynote why it was important to have meetings for black physicists. During a previous NSBP, he and a group of black men exchanged nerdy chit-chat about physics until slowly the conversation turned to being pulled over for driving while black. One by one, he said, they went around and recounted a story of being afraid for their lives during an unnecessary police stop. At no other conference, Tyson told us, could black physicists find community where conversation could range so freely across all of their intellectual and social experiences. I recently recalled this important lesson about identity and community during a conversation with fellow black women academics that began as a discussion about history of science and technology, the subject of the conference we were attending, but eventually turned to another unfortunately common experience. Each of us had been sexually harassed and/or assaulted by a fellow black male academic. Each of us felt like it was necessary to protect the men involved and/or didn't think we would be believed if we told the truth. Last week's renewal of the conversation about Tyson's alleged sexual misconduct against women academics got me thinking about another memory of him. I had met Tyson the day before his speech at that 2003 conference. I was a starstruck 20-year-old college senior who had never stayed in a 5-star hotel before and attempted to make conversation, so the best I came up with was, wow, this conference is so fancy. Who is paying for all this? Neil responded, didn't you read the conference program? Where's your conference program? Before I knew it, there was the Neil deGrasse Tyson going through my backpack, taking various items out and making me laugh as he told jokes about the contents. The following year, I was a graduate student in astronomy, and feeling a bit lost in a small, very white town on a campus where not only was I the only black graduate student in my department, but I was one of only about 10 across the entire university. I emailed Tyson looking for advice. While I have very little recollection of what happened on the subsequent phone call, I do remember I felt so encouraged that Neil deGrasse Tyson had taken time out of his day to call me, and I remember distinctly that he said what I most needed to hear, that I could do it. Tyson was, yet again, an encouraging role model. But all of the men who have harassed or assaulted me have said similarly encouraging things. So the fact that I have had multiple positive interactions with Tyson over the years doesn't make it harder to believe that he is guilty of serious misconduct. I'm extremely conscious of the fact that the United States has a tendency to punish black people more severely than white people accused of the same crime, and I expect that Tyson won't be defended the way other scientists accused of harassment such as Jeff Marcy, Christian Ott, and Lawrence Krauss were. Lawrence Krauss, I should note, was one of the people in Jeffrey Epstein's Little Black Book. Over the years, hating on Tyson has become a public pastime that inspired such irrational levels of passion that it seemed evidently racist. As the news of these latest accusations came out, people came out of the woodwork to tell me how not surprising it was. He said something sexist once, and he always gave me the creeps. None of these comments were made to me about white astronomers who in the last 3 years have been publicly accused of chronic sexual misconduct. But my own experience, backed by data, teaches me that black patriarchy is real, and the harm specifically to black women is significant. In this case, the harm is multidimensional. I believe Ahmet is the victim, and to a lesser extent, so are all of the black people who found inspiration in Tyson's visible presence as the world's most well-known black scientist. So too were Native Americans when Tyson referred to a Native American handshake in his response to one of the more recent accusations, as if Native Americans all come from a single culture that can be used as a shield against sexual harassment allegations. In his Facebook note, Tyson notes that long after dropping out of astrophysics graduate school, Ahmet was posting videos of coloured tuning forks endowed with vibrational therapeutic energy that she channels from the orbiting planets. As a scientist, I found this odd, as if her spirituality somehow impeaches her believability. It's ironic that he makes this case while also arguing another sexual harassment accusation comes down to a misunderstood attempt to share spirit energy. While some will be celebrating the inevitable damage these accusations do to Tyson's public image, I cannot. I will instead worry about what will happen to the Google search results for black scientist. I will instead be reminded that the United States is a place where there are a multitude of visible white men science superstars, but only one black person can get his foot through the door. I will wonder how different things might go in a society where taking responsibility was encouraged by a foundational investment in restorative justice. I will also feel angry at Neil. It's true that some of the details of these allegations have yet to be corroborated, and both Fox News and National Geographic have launched investigations. But in my view, I believe the claims are credible, which means he directly harmed multiple women, most egregiously by allegedly raping a member of his own already marginalized community. Chia Ahmet is a black woman who will never join me on the list of African American women with PhDs in physics. She deserves better. Our whole community did. Following the allegations against him, both Cosmos and StarTalk went on hiatus. Neil deGrasse Tyson kept his job at the Hayden Planetarium, and unfortunately for us all, he kept tweeting.
We should be glad that in this world there is still due process.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, the post-scandal poster. I think a lot of us, myself included, assumed that following the allegations against him, Neil deGrasse Tyson would walk off into the sunset, as many people accused of things far less egregious than him have. Like, Aziz Ansari got the mildest Me Too of them all, and we still didn't see another series of Master of None. Although I do get it, for a person of colour, it's... You don't want to succumb when other people are getting a chance, like Louis C.K. is still performing shows. White people get so many more chances, but maybe a low profile, or at least an apology, would have been good. This, however, was not meant to be. Neil deGrasse Tyson is, unfortunately, a poster at heart. His comments on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart about the studio having the wrong stars in the sky was fun pedantry, but that should have been a clue about the man. He has the mind of a poster. He loves a good, well actually comment. And boy, is Twitter made for those. So, instead of going quietly into that good night, Neil deGrasse Tyson stayed fairly online, making pedantic comments about movies and holidays. But then he had to go and defend Elon Musk during the wayward billionaire's midlife crisis Twitter buying fascism teasing spiral, and any discourse about Musk immediately takes it to the top of the news, so if you forgot that Neil deGrasse Tyson existed, well, you can't. On December 21st, 2022, in the lead-up to a very Elon Christmas, Neil deGrasse Tyson tweeted, "While casting shade on Elon Musk for what he's done, is doing, or will do, try to pause and remember that he made electric cars a normal thing in society and he commercialized space, for cargo, satellites, and people. Count him among those who are inventing civilization's future. The thing is, Elon Musk didn't do any of these things, and as an astrophysicist, you would think Neil deGrasse Tyson would be more concerned about someone filling the sky with space junk, as Elon Musk's Starlink has been doing, and as a black man, he should really be more concerned about the red pill shit he's slipping into, but rich person solidarity is the most consistent form of solidarity. And an attack on Elon, I suppose, is an attack on all people with divorced guy energy everywhere. This tweet, a picture of the main characters from James Cameron's Avatar, was arguably worse than this, being both profoundly tone deaf and worse, completely unfunny. But the combination of both these tweets and the rest of his Twitter feed, which is a smorgasbord of the most tiresome pedanticism you might expect from someone who thinks Blue Lives Matter is a funny joke, does suggest that not only has he not learned and reflected in the time since the aforementioned allegations were made against him, but that he just wants to be part of the conversation again. In a way, I can't blame him, but are these the hills you want to die on? Don't you have anything to say to the people you hurt? I mean, not only the lives you destroyed, but the image you represented to so many people that your thoughtless and selfish actions have tarnished. The dreams that may have been paused, because you couldn't stop yourself from abusing your power. Apparently not. His response seems to have been to just ignore that whole thing and move past it, and instead tweet pedantic comments about movies and his continuing attempt to be the Twitter guy equivalent to CinemaSins, generally just acting like he's been asked to take on literally everything happening in the world every day of the week, and coming out with such bangers as, "The leap day is misnamed. We're not leaping anywhere. The calendar is simply and abruptly catching up with Earth's orbit." In my day, the word awesome was reserved for things like curing polio and walking on the moon, not for food or TV shows. If there were ever a kind of species for whom sex hurt, it surely went extinct long ago. Which is all kind of yikes. Like, what? Who? Why? What prompted this? This is a bad look. And the pinnacle of them all, of course. The film A Marriage Story, 2019, should instead have been named A Divorce Story. In fact, his commitment to being the well actually guy on Twitter went as far as minimizing the El Paso and Dayton mass shootings in 2019. From August the 4th of that year, in the past 48 hours, the USA horrifically lost 34 people to mass shootings. On average, across any 48 hours we lose 500 to medical errors, 300 to the flu, 250 to suicide, 200 to car accidents, 40 to homicide via handgun. Often our emotions respond more to spectacle than to data. What can you even say to that besides, sometimes it's better not to have a take, especially if the thing you're looking to have a take on is an awful tragedy and one that is still fresh in the minds of the survivors and the victims' family and friends. If your ego does not let you shut up to let people mourn a mass shooting, maybe you need to work out a way to put your ego in check. There's a popular fetishization in science, especially among male academics, that rationality is inherently superior to emotion. A sort of Vulcan ideology that is, even upon slightest inspection, kind of bullshit. In most scenarios where someone tells you to stop being emotional and think rationally, it's at best annoying. I can't think of a worse time, in fact, to invoke this already questionable mantra when over 30 people have been tragically murdered. Obviously, lots of people die from a whole bunch of different causes, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be mourning those who could have lived were it not for the malice of one person with a gun. They did not choose to kill themselves. They did not have a medical error. They didn't have the flu, and they didn't end up in a car accident. They were murdered. En masse. Sometimes pedantry can be fun. Almost always, it's cringe. Sometimes it's just fucking wrong. This is one of those times. Ultimately, it's not my place to judge Neil deGrasse Tyson's legacy. Far from it. I was a fan of his as a younger scientist, but I'm not black, and it's up to black people to judge how he fits into the world. They're the people who needed his image the most when it was there for him, and who his reputation being dragged through the mud by his own actions will affect the most. And my full solidarity to all of them. I hope that more people turn up that do less shitty things. I can't decide whether what good he did through representation can ever now not be tainted by the horrible things that he's done to women. It's not up to me, what the lasting effect of his career will be, nor should it be. But I hope to God more black scientists get their shot at fame, that more black scientists get the same chance as Neil got. Because I don't want to see other people suffer because of this man's sins. The community deserved better, the victims deserved better. It really sucks that one of the few famous black scientists in the world had to be an asshole. I hope we get to see 1,000 more in his wake. Neil deGrasse Tyson made the shitty things he did, just like 100 other powerful men before him. It's nothing to do with him being black, and they shouldn't taint the cause he had helped before that because of this. His community does not deserve to suffer for his misdeeds. They deserve so much more than that. If anything, his abuse of power as a senior scientist makes him tragically ordinary. Tragically typical. Even during my short time as a working scientist, I've seen several black women pushed out of academia by the racism baked deep into its bones. And this structural racism is exacerbated by the actions of racist individuals that universities always go out of their way to defend. Even in 2022, just 1% of UK professors are black. We cannot let the actions of one man, however horrific, stop the fight for equal representation in the sciences. We just can't. It's not, academia is not good at retaining minorities. It is absolutely horrific at that. It is famous for pushing people out who aren't in the in-group. We cannot stop fighting this cause, even if one of the main figures showing us how it can be done has to be disavowed. There will be more. There should be more. There will be more, God fucking willing. Neil deGrasse Tyson wasn't the hero he initially seemed to be, but we still need those heroes, and I hope people get them, because they'd make such a difference for so many people. Until that day, I'll be watching the stars. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, and again, this is not the kind of racism that the 1950s or 40s, you know, I wasn't lynched, you know, so again, I don't want to claim equal trauma to what earlier generations had experienced, but you can get, let's call it institutional racism, where you don't
not even racism. I'm talking about people trying to put you off your passion, telling you it's not.
That's I'm calling that racism. What I'm saying is, they see that I'm athletic. I've been athletic most of my life, and they can't wrap their head around me being something other than an athlete that they watch on television. When I say, well, I actually like astrophysics, but you're so good at this other sport. No, I want to be in the physics club. No, we need you on the basketball team. And they think they're doing me a favor. They think they're saying nice things to me. But every one of those is a force operating against my ambitions. And so, in a way, just that my skin color in my life's arc was a path of most resistance compared to where I wanted to land. And by the way, we just spent a half hour talking about this, and I hardly ever talk about it. I don't talk about it because I don't need to. Maybe if it's a counseling session, but I'm perfectly fine. I'm a happy guy, happily married, got 2 kids, and I hardly ever talk about skin color because I want to make it irrelevant as quickly as I possibly can in every context I'm possibly in. So, if you're going to invite me to give a public talk in February, Black History Month, I will decline that invitation. If you only think of me as a black scientist, then I have failed as a scientist. Period. You want me to, and you know how I realized this? Okay? So I will tell you the moment after which I was a different person interacting with the public. Okay? I'm in graduate school. There's an explosion on the sun. And the press, it's over the wires. Press hears about this. So they want to get a comment on it. An explosion on the sun. So they called Columbia, the Department of Astronomy. And they're looking for it was lunchtime. They were all out to lunch. I'm a doctoral candidate. I'm there for my PhD. And so the department admin is going through the roster, and they get to me and say, Neil, no one is here. Can you take this call? So I said, sure.
And they said, oh, hello, who are you? I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, doctoral candidate in astrophysics. They say, there's an explosion on the sun. Should we be worried? I said, oh, it's a solar flare. They happen with some frequency. It's a wave of particles coming towards Earth. And they said, you mean the Earth is fine? I said, the Earth is fine. And they said, can you tell us that on camera? I sure. Okay, we'll send up a limo to pick you up in a half hour. And so the whole conversation, there it was. And it was pre-taped. I get home, I put on the TV, and I watched this interview. And I had an out-of-body experience. I just witnessed something I've never seen before in my life. And you know what that was? It was the news interviewing a black person, me, who was not an entertainer or athlete, okay? Interviewing a black person for expertise that had nothing to do with being black. The interview didn't say at the end, well, how do black people feel about solar flares? Oh, does this affect dark skin differently? None of that. It was, will Earth be safe? And he's getting that expertise from a black person. I'd never seen that. And then I thought, well, is it just because I'm on TV and I'm a little more aware? So I watched for the next 2 years, every time there was a black person brought onto the news for expertise. It was someone who's a member of Congress representing a community and they want enterprise zones for the economics. There is someone who is worried about the poverty in the inner city. Never had an audience seen a black person as an expert. Oh, they would have attorneys, but it's talking about a court case about a black person. Would they ever bring a black attorney to talk about a court case about a white person? No. And I said to myself, that is the answer. That's how we turn an entire world of people who think black people are just dumb and stupid, lazy, shiftless, and all they can do is shine my shoes and entertain me and sing and be the athlete on the field. If there was ever a force to change that, it's not people telling them they should think differently. It's me being visible in a way where they have no other choice but to say, oh my gosh, this person knows more about this subject than I do, and he has dark skin. So that the next time they see a homeless black person, they're not saying, oh, black people are just like, they have to confront the fact that they just saw a black person tell them that Earth was safe. So it's just quite simple. The next time you're driving your car and somebody comes up with a squeegee to wash your window at the red light and begs for money, and if that person is black, maybe you'll think twice about the causes and effects of poverty, of the forces that operate, that discriminate against one community of people versus another. So, ever since that moment, I have declined interviews that want me because I'm black. And even in this interview, I'm not entirely comfortable spending a half hour talking about it, because it turns this interview into something about me being black, which then is someone hears me for the first time. Oh, let's get him. He has all these stories about being black. Let's get him to talk to this group about in this race conference. No, I will decline that invitation.
Thank you, once again, to my patrons for supporting this wonderful channel, where you can pay me just £1 a month to have your name read out at the end, like Joey Cobalt, Scarjan, Charles TS MTMS, and Nerania. Early videos? You could get those too. And a Discord? Soon. I'm gonna get on that. Anyway, while you're here, why not like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with your friends? And if you know any black scientists, send them a couple of quid. They probably need it. Science doesn't pay like it used to, especially if you're not a white man. Until then, until next time, watch the skies.